Welcome to the Circular Economy Show, and it's 2022, our first episode of the new year. It's a jam-packed episode. We'll be focusing on the importance of goal setting and setting big trackable targets for large businesses and at scale, alongside the importance of innovation and the need for disruption to the status quo. A little bit later on, we'll be exploring the world of food design, and we'll be talking to some businesses that are setting targets to become regenerative, to do better for nature. But first, let's dive into the world of plastic packaging, a much discussed topic, especially in terms of the amount that leaks into our oceans and the damage that that causes. It was especially brought to light in a 2020 publication by the Pew Charitable Trusts that called Breaking the Plastic Wave, which highlighted that we're not going to recycle our way out of this crisis. We need innovation. We need design that turns ambition into action. We need innovation that's upstream in the way we design our products and our business models and our packaging. My colleague Laura Franco-Hanau recently had a chance to visit the Design Museum, where they have an exhibition that's showcasing exactly that kind of innovation. Featuring more than 300 objects, the Design Museum's Wastage exhibit showcases the possibility and the variety of circular economy innovation focused at the design stage. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Laura Franco-Hanau recently had the chance to visit the exhibition and to speak to one of the founders of the innovations on display. Safia Qureshi is the CEO and founder of ClubZero, a reusable solution for food and beverage packaging.
So hi, Safia. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I wanted to ask you first to kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself and the story behind ClubZero.
Sure. I'm Safia. I'm founder and CEO at ClubZero. I'm an architect by background, so I love thinking about big-scale operations that are citywide. ClubZero was really born. We used to be called Cup Club, so we won the New Plastics Economy Prize. We rebranded ClubZero. It's a zero-waste system that's a citywide system enabling consumers to return packaging when they're finished to a network of return points when they're finished. So not throwing it away, but reusing and perpetuating this circular economy of reuse. That's our mission, and we want to really grow this as a city-scale operation.
And how does it literally work?
So on two levels. So if you think about it from a 20,000-foot perspective, from a city level, it's essentially a network of drop points that are established across the city, giving convenience to the consumer. So you can buy your food and beverage to go in reusable containers and return it to any of these points, not just where you bought it, but on the go. Then on the more sort of ground level, we work with major brands. So we've just recently done a partnership with Nestle. We have a partnership with Just Eat Takeaway on the food delivery side. And so we work with restaurants and cafes, and we operate on a reuse system. We design reusable packaging that they can distribute and use, and that's specific to their requirements. So on both scales, if you think about it from 20,000 feet at a sort of infrastructure level, and then from a ground level, what that means for your everyday food and beverage to go.
And I wanted to also ask you, where can we find, or if let's say I'm a user, I want to use ClubZero, what can I do? Is it an app that I go and I just check where are the collection points or the kind of like restaurants or places?
Exactly. So we've launched in King's Cross. We've done our first city urban sort of launch. So you can download ClubZero, iOS, Android apps. They're available. You can find your nearest location. It's across food and beverage. You can also select those same restaurants in the Just Eat app and have those delivered to your home. So you have two options. It's either on the go, where you might be out and about, or you have the other alternative that if you're at home, you can have zero waste deliveries brought to your home. So we've just started. It's 25 isn't a huge number of locations, but we're growing. We've just expanded into London's largest university campus, which is University College London. The partnership with Nestle took us to COP26, and with Just Eat, we're really scaling up operations now across London. So you'll find more and more of this happening across the city. And remember, there are two areas that we work on, the 20,000 foot and then on the ground. So the 20,000 foot really requires a more strategic view on the city and partnerships with different city organizers and owners and estate owners. So these are the two ways that we establish the network and the infrastructure, as well as the packaging, the physical packaging itself with different brands. So yeah, we're going to be very busy in Q1. You'll see lots of things coming out.
Nice. And I wanted to ask you, what's the most exciting challenge that you're facing at the moment?
I guess the exciting challenge, what we're doing is we're really focusing on what are the generic reuse packaging prototypes that need to be converted first, right? So if you look at some of the ones that we've started now, the 12-ounce cup is like your everyday product. It's what everybody uses. Is like the to-go coffee cup size. We have more sizes coming out. The 800 ml food container, that's like your standard food container size that you see across food deliveries. But there are immense amount of other packaging types, right? So what we're just making sure is we have like the archetype of each one. We convert that to reusables. We create those as your staples. And then we look at more sort of specific packaging types that might be more required by specific brands. But right now our focus is looking across a number of brands and identifying which ones are the most commonly used ones and then building those out. So that's the exciting bit. It's just finding those patterns and finding where the volumes lie, because then you become, you become the standard. And that's what I want to do. We want to become the standard. You walk into any food takeaway, quick service restaurant, you see the same packaging type in single use. We will be the reusable version of that.
So standardization is really
Correct.
one of the key factors as well.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
What are the next key things that you think need to happen in the circular economy space that would help your business scale?
So the first thing I would say is what I've described to you is an immensely ambitious plan, right? This is basically saying to across multi-stakeholders from, government, city owners, estate owners, brands, recyclers, and then consumers. This is an infrastructure play at all levels. It requires an awful lot of operations. You require a lot of funding for that sort of stuff. This isn't like sort of small scale operations. You're thinking of the likes of Tesla, you're thinking of the likes of Uber. So what we need is adequate financing in this space. We need the opportunity to grow it, but not grow it so incrementally that it's barely noticeable, but grow it in the way that we can within this decisive decade and deliver.
So innovation is happening. But what does this look like at scale? Coca-Cola are one of the largest producers of plastic packaging globally. And I recently had a chance to catch up with their Chief Sustainability Officer, Perez, to ask her about their foray into the world of reuse and upstream innovation, how they're progressing against key targets, and about some of the sticky challenges and barriers that they're facing. Just out of curiosity, what made you join Coca-Cola 27 years ago? Is that just a chance thing, that was just a job, or was there a particular motivation?
No, so I was a conflicted young adult trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and that didn't seem right for me. I was on that path, and I was pursuing that education, and then I took a pause, and I volunteered at a place called the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I had about 1 year to really make this decision. At the time I was volunteering, I met the people at Coca-Cola, and I remember meeting some folks who were working in the marketing organization in Hispanic marketing. And I'm half Cuban, half Spanish. I have always wanted to continue to do more for my community. And so I found this was a really nice way to have a conversation that was really unexpected in terms of what a career at Coca-Cola could be like. So I took this sort of side path where I left the chamber and I went to work for Coca-Cola's ad agency, but within Coca-Cola. And I was assigned to the Hispanic marketing. And that's what actually led to the permanent role at Coca-Cola after doing some work in that space in terms of community. I was more on the community side. And what was fascinating for me is Coke for me became a place that I felt like I could really make a difference. It might sound a little hokey because that's our purpose statement. But I was asked at a very young age for my point of view. I was asked how to challenge the business. What else should we be doing? By some very senior leaders. And I was a little surprised by that because as a young adult coming, from university, I had heard, all sorts of things about corporate America and bureaucracy. And I wasn't necessarily wanting to go down that path. But I found Coca-Cola was a much more welcoming culture, a culture that wanted to learn, to be better, and valued multiple points of views. And all of a sudden I found that I could have not just a career, but actually really learn and develop myself and give back at the same time. I didn't have to make a choice to do one or the other, that I could actually give back while I was also building my career and my professional development.
Some people will look at a company like Coca-Cola and say, well, actually, as an organization, you've been incredibly successful in a version of the economy that we're not talking about today. In many ways, a very successful company in the linear economy. What's your kind of message to those people when we're talking about Coca-Cola's ambitions in the kind of ESG or circular economy space?
So for me, it's this much broader conversation in terms of we're in crisis in our world. We have got to really step up for this next generation, and we can't wait. There's a sense of urgency that I'm sure everyone is feeling today. And business, I know on some hand, some people say, well, business is big. That's not good. On the other hand, I'd say business is big. That means we can drive scale, we can make meaningful change, and we have the resources to do it, and we have to take the accountability. So I love moving from what you call that linear economy to a circular economy, because I believe that's where we can really add value, drive the scale of change that's required, and protect our world for future generations to come. And I think that it's okay if business is thriving at the same time, because that means the more money we make, the more we can put back into the circular economy. Let's make our money circular too, right?
One very tangible initiative that Coca-Cola is attached to is something called the Universal Bottle in Latin America, a reuse initiative. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that as a kind of example of some of the impacts you can have.
Yeah, so part of what you're talking about is our holistic strategy in packaging of world without waste. So how do we design out waste and design in better sustainable materials and reduce our reliance on virgin plastics? So Universal Bottle was a phenomenal example of that, where we have a 2-liter bottle, same shape. We put everything from our Coke to Fanta to Sprite within there. It's part of our refillable strategy, which also is a more affordable package for the consumer. And it's more responsible because it can be cleaned and refilled over 25 times. It's removed out or replaced over 200 million bottles in terms of what would have been created as new. So just imagine the amount of plastic that you're reducing out of the marketplace and reducing the waste. We've looked at that bottle and we've looked at scaling it across other areas as well. At the same time, what we have today in over 40 plus markets is we've expanded our refillable strategy. And so we want to continue to expand that as part of our vision around world without waste. And we want to ensure that we're able to grow that package type because we're finding that it has multiple benefits to the consumer in terms of pricing, but also to the environment in terms of a better material that eliminates all the waste and actually does create value and allows us to, be a more responsible business. So, I'm really excited because when I see 40 plus markets who've adopted on their own, I can tell you that this is important to the business and they're seeing the benefits. And at the same time, in some places, it's already almost 25% of the package mix. So we see that it's also growing.
And the universe, just to dwell on that universal bottle for a moment, is that the customers return it and it gets reused, or do they hold on to it and refill it themselves?
So they return it and it gets reused. And so we have in some places a reverse package collection system. It depends on where you are and which part of Brazil or Latin America you're in. You can either drop it at the retail location and then it gets collected by the business, or in some places there's a home delivery pickup. So it's it's really an interesting opportunity, we believe, for different companies to look at how can they, consider refillables within their own businesses, and does it make sense for them. But for us, we know to scale this is a very simple innovation that is highly scalable and has multiple benefits.
And the 25% of packaging mix, it's really significant, and that's happened in a very short space of time, which is why it's such a compelling example. It's a compelling example of reuse, although the most recent at the foundation, we published this kind of global commitment progress report, which Coca-Cola is signed up to and part of, which is kind of tracking targets. And a lot of the story there is actually quite positive in terms of virgin plastics reduction projections. The reuse side of that is that there's a lot of exciting innovations like the one we just talked about, but actually it's still a very small percentage of the overall global market, both for Coca-Cola and across the kind of spectrum of players in the industry. For you, and in some ways actually not growing that fast as a percentage of the whole market, for you, what's needed in that space to accelerate the kind of scaling you were just talking about and kind of bend the curve to make that a more mainstream, more significant percentage of how people access packaging?
So I'd say a couple things. One is we take the accountability where we've got to make the capital investments where it doesn't exist today, and make sure that we put that equipment in place and that we teach our own system how to do it and how to do it well. So, we operate in over 200 markets. So 40 is a great start. And I think that that's really remarkable for where we are. It's certainly not where we want to be. And so how do we make sure those capital investments are there with our system and that we put that infrastructure in place? The other piece is working with the retailers or the collection systems to ensure that then if we offer it up, how do we get it back? And so we do fund many programs around the world in terms of collection. I think we're going to have to continue to do more at maybe the point of the retail location where it's been purchased, or ensure that we can get some at-home collection and ramp up that scale. And then also ensuring that the facilities are there to wash and refill the bottle, which that's part of that capital investment.
I mean, another big kind of topic in the plastics packaging space, and something we track through the Global Commitment Progress Report, is recycled plastic content in packaging, and the sense that actually once we start to get material flows back and we're designing new things with materials that are being used, then we're kind of making the circular economy happen. Coca-Cola has a target by 2025 of 25%, which lines up against many other players in the space. And since that target was set, I think it's gone from 8% to 9% to 11.7% in the most recent publication. And that, it feels helpfully like progressive and incremental, but what are the challenges and barriers there to really scaling that up and accelerating towards that, well, at least that 25% target and obviously beyond?
Yeah, so I'd hope to be much further along right now, even though I know we have a little bit more time to get there. I do think with the lockdowns a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, when the pandemic first started, that stopped a lot of collection. So to increase the rPET usage, we do need to get that material back. And rightfully so, we didn't want anyone out there collecting these materials if they were putting themselves in harm's way. And so we had to pivot and understand, so what did that mean to the rPET usage rates? Because we have investments in facilities that our bottlers have invested in, something called PetStar in Mexico, which actually takes the material, returns it to another bottle, or whatever can't be used bottle to bottle goes to another resource. Same thing with Infinio in France, or recently some of the expansion in Petco in Africa. A lot of that work slowed. It's moving again, and it's back in terms of collection, and people have found ways to ensure that they're collecting in a very safe way. There's also other places in terms of where infrastructure is still lacking. And so we know that we have to put a heavier emphasis on this to meet those targets. We are proud that even during the pandemic, we did get some of our markets where some of our packages are 100% rPET today. Including in North America, we actually launched a 13.2 ounce Coca-Cola package with 100% rPET. And so we have found that if we can keep showing that momentum and keep getting the collection to open up and keep progressing there, we also have found that showing the proof points helps our business learn a different way to work in this new situation or environment.
I suppose this is the value of creating that public target and tracking yourself against it year after year, because it challenges you as an organization and gives you, I guess, the ammunition in the organization in some ways to have these conversations, like what needs to change, and the solutions may not be as literal as just how do we collect more rPET. They might be how do we innovate with a design to allow us to collect less rPET, or have to collect less high quality rPET. You mentioned policy a bit earlier, and I wanted to come back to that because Coca-Cola and a few other large, fast-moving consumer good companies have taken an interesting step in endorsing a statement from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation on extended producer responsibility, EPR, and on a call for a treaty, a global treaty for plastics. Why have you done that?
Well, it's important to show that we're willing to support business working together with government to drive the fundamental change. And so there's plenty of governments who already involved in EPR and have done this work for years. But then there's also some who maybe are not as familiar with what it really takes to do it. And so for us, it's about how do you inspire by putting these statements forward and working through collective action to drive that change. And so that's why we signed up, because we believe in it. We know that we have proof points that it works and it can make a difference. And then how do we inspire everyone to work together, to align it, to do this in a common way to drive scalable change?
And it's interesting, right? Because it's easy to say we need policy. In many ways, it's more valuable to say which policies. Some people will be surprised by some of the organizations that have endorsed EPR, for instance, because that does actually add a cost, add an investment to your business.
Yes, it does. But what we have found is that it can actually help to work in terms of the goals that we've set on World Without Waste. So if you look at the whole, this is why I always believe we have to step back and look at the larger picture. If you look at what that can do, that actually starts to create an even playing field for all of the industry to make sure that we're clear on what is the goal, how is the mechanism going to work, how do we ensure that we're getting the collection done, that there's infrastructure to reprocess the material, how do we make sure that we're all playing our part. And it does provide that sort of that playing field where it's really clear what you're trying to do, and that there's this accountability and the tension in terms of regulation. I know not all businesses like regulation. Sometimes you need regulation to drive scalable change. Sometimes you need regulation to ensure that we're all doing what we say we're doing, or that the definitions are clear. So for us, we look at it and we say, yes, while it drives maybe a short-term cost, a long-term benefit certainly outweighs the short-term cost.
I liked B, and it was good to hear about those kind of glimpses of progress, like the universal bottle example from Latin America. But it was also clear that there's still a really long way to go, for instance, in accelerating against some of those recycled plastic packaging targets. You heard in that conversation mention of the New Plastics Global Commitment, a set of targets, for instance, the ambition to have all plastic packaging, 100% of plastic packaging, reusable, recyclable, compostable by 2025. And if you want to find out more about that, or to see companies' progress against those targets, you can find that on our website. One of the businesses that have demonstrated progress through the course of the Global Commitment reporting process are Unilever. For instance, they've lifted their recycled packet plastic content from only 1% to up to 11%. I recently had the chance to catch up with their packaging lead, Pablo Costa, to find out, among other things, how they've done that, as well as where they still have challenges and barriers to overcome. So Pablo, thank you so much for joining us. And I actually wanted to start by just asking for a bit of info about your backstory. Like, what's your kind of comic book origin story to where you've got to today in Unilever?
Oh, hello, Seb. I'm really pleased to be here with you today. That's a good question, because we are here to talk about packaging and my role in packaging in Unilever. And actually, I'm not a packaging person by training. I've been in Unilever for 25 years. I started my career straight from university. I did a degree in chemistry and a master's in chemistry. So I joined Unilever to work in chemistry. So that was my plan. And after about 17 years working in chemistry, product development, formulation development for different categories within the company, I decided to transition to packaging and do a bit of an experiment, go into the packaging world, which I found very exciting and very challenging at the time. And yes, ever since I've been working in packaging, will be now about 8 years that I've been in the packaging world.
And what, can you remember like a moment or what triggered that kind of desire to shift within the organization in such a big way?
Yes, actually, there was a moment. It was about 9 years ago. I was very, very lucky to receive a family visiting us, and my brother-in-law is a sailor, and we arranged a sailing holiday with the family, the first one and only one we ever had. And I remember being sailing in a very remote place in Greece. We stopped with the boat and we said, let's go to the beach. So I remember going to the beach, and when I got to the beach, I found in that very isolated place a plastic bottle of a product I was responsible for, of a brand I was responsible for. And I felt this is wrong. This is totally wrong. This is not where this product belongs. It should not be here. And that was the moment when I realized the magnitude of the problem we were facing. And that was the moment where I felt, well, you know what? Maybe I can do something about this. Maybe I can help with this. And that was the trigger for me to transition to work in packaging.
As you know, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation pushes along with the UN Environment, pushes the new Plastic Economy Global Commitment, which Unilever has signed up for. There's an annual set of targets and annual reporting. Unilever are kind of one of the success stories there, one of the top 3 companies in terms of progress on recycled PET, for instance, where from the beginning of the reporting period, you've gone from 1% to over 11% in the latest reporting round. What's kind of been behind that success, and what's needed to drive towards, I think the target by 2025 is 25% and beyond?
I would say, Seb, what is behind that is our journey on sustainability is at the core of our purpose. We do have our challenges, of course we do. When we try to introduce and when we work to introduce recycled material in our products, there are challenges. There are technical challenges. There are cost challenges. The cost of recycled material, it is very high, and we're struggling to find a way around that. But that is not going to stop us. So there are great examples. You mentioned PET. When you look at Hellmann's, our portfolio, 100% recycled material. And only Hellmann's has helped us to introduce 14,000 tons of recycled material in our portfolio. When we talk about the overall commitment, that commitment is to get to 25% by 2025. But the reality is we are going and we are determined to get to that level way before 2025. And I would say 25% PCR is only the first step. We are aiming to go much, much, much higher than that.
Another really key area, and the Pew research that came out in 2020 that kind of said we're not going to be able to recycle our way out of this alone, is innovation that either keeps plastic packaging or plastic material that goes into packaging in circulation, or indeed innovation that kind of eliminates plastic packaging that we don't need. And again, there's Unilever has had quite a broad range of pilots in this area over the last couple of years across different products, detergents, shampoos, deodorants, and in a few different regions, Chile, Mexico, the UK. How would you summarize the kind of learnings, what's worked, what's been a failure, what are the next steps from these kind of reuse pilots?
Right, maybe several step back for a second, and I will explain. Within our commitments, there is one that has been introduced in 2019, which is that we are committed to reduce to half the amount of virgin plastic we use by the year 2025. And not only that, but we also have said that we will eliminate at least 100,000 tons of plastic from our portfolio. That is we are the only company that has committed to an absolute reduction of plastic. And when it comes to reduce the amount of virgin plastic we use, that is the most challenging commitment across the industry. And that, we believe, is the very important part when we start really reducing the amount of virgin plastic we use. Now, refills and reuse, that is another pillar of our 7-pillar strategy. And in my opinion, it will play a very, very important role in the future in order to reduce the amount of plastic we use. 2 different ways of doing it, what we call refills at home. We have a lot of great examples already in the market. We have a Safia refill that allows you, by concentrating your product and refill it at home, to reduce 75% the amount of plastic we use in our Safe brand. We have a Omo, a laundry detergent in Brazil, where the consumers can buy a concentrating product in a small bottle, take it home, dilute it with water. The experience at the end of the day is the same. And again, 70% reduction in the amount of plastic we use, and it has been extremely successful in Brazil and Argentina. And then you move into what we call refills in store. refills in store is a quite different experience. It will require, and it's something we're working on changing your habits, the way you shopping, the way you experience your first interaction with your product. At the moment, we have 28 different pilots around the world of different scales, different sizes, slightly different proposition when it comes to refill in store. We have perhaps the UK is the country where we have the most, and we have quite successful experiences. One is with Asda. We have done in partnership with the Beauty Kitchen, where consumers can go to the store and by using a metal bottle, aluminum bottle, get your product, bring that bottle back, and keep reusing it. An area with huge potential, but it's an area where we still need to work in collaboration with retailers and with our partners to find what is the right execution and how to bring our consumers on that journey. Because again, it will imply changing habits, changing the way we interact with our products, and we need to bring the consumers in that journey with us.
Pablo, I'm going to ask you a question that's really, really easy for me to ask and probably quite tough for you to answer, which is, like we've talked about the variety of different things, many, many, many pilots in many different places. Of course, reuse or refill, the different kinds of innovations still make up probably a very small percentage of Unilever's overall portfolio. What is needed, or what are the big challenges in order to help this to reach scale?
Yes, you're right. The scale is small, but we are in that experimentation phase. I mentioned we have 28, and not all of them will be successful. Some of them will work, some of them will not. I think the key here, Sebi, is to identify which is a solution that works for different markets and different products and different categories. I don't believe there will be one solution that fits all. There will be different models that we will be working with different partners to make them work. What we need here is a scale. And again, going back to my point about partnerships, we need to start looking into what are those partnerships that will help us to get to that scale. I mentioned the example of Asda. We are working with Tesco in the UK, different pilots, all of them very successful, but all of them still limited. So if you want to be successful and really start driving change with impact, we need a scale. And this is, for me, the key success element. And we are hoping to find that and achieve that through partnerships.
Another topic that I find really interesting, Pablo, because you were talking about partnerships earlier. Unilever is one of a number of businesses that have recently endorsed the need for EPR and the need for a global treaty, a legally binding global treaty on plastics and on plastic pollution. Why have you done that?
Well, we are part of 70 companies, actually, that we have signed up for it, supporting a plastic global treaty through the United Nations. And the main reason, Seb, is because we need a level playing field for this. Yeah, we need to ensure we all play with the same rules. That is, we are supportive of it. And that's why we believe that that treaty, it should be legally binding. It's very, very important. It is legally binding, so there's no way around this. And the second element for the treaty will be we have to ensure that we'll drive reduction in the amount of virgin plastic is produced to force the system to start moving into a more circular system. So those are the two key elements. When it comes to EPR schemes, extended producer responsibility schemes, again, we are supportive of those schemes as long as they are implemented and created in the right way. We believe it will help the industry as a whole to move into circular system.
I think for me, it demonstrates also the value of setting these public targets, because it kind of, as an organization, it makes you start to think, well, we need innovation, we need a level playing field, and it kind of helps you to orientate towards kind of more specific solutions and more specific asks of partners versus, it's very easy to say we need policy, but it's more useful to say we need these policies specifically, and we kind of agree on that as an industry. I think it's fair to say that even the leaders of this transition, even the organisations at the front of it, still have a very long way to go. We need to continue to raise the ambitions levels whilst also accelerating the innovation and design agenda. It's design that turns ambition into action. You'll have heard both of my guests, Bea and Pablo. We talked a bit about the an idea of a global treaty on plastics. And just last week, 70 businesses, including Coca-Cola and Unilever, signed a statement calling for legally binding measures from the United Nations on plastics and plastics pollution. It's a really unprecedented, the first time that industry has signalled so clearly the need for such measures, such robust measures on the topic of plastics. Now for something completely different. You'll know as regular viewers of the Circular Economy show that we talk about there being 3 principles for a circular economy: eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials, and regenerate nature. But what does it mean for a business to become regenerative? Well, at the end of last year, I spent some time in Glasgow at COP26, and I caught up with 2 businesses, PepsiCo and Walmart, who have both made announcements about becoming nature positive, to find out a bit more about what that means. Thank you so much for joining us in the Circular Economy Cafe here at the New York Times Climate Hub in Glasgow at COP26. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. So you work at Walmart. What's your kind of background and story?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's so great to be here, and it's so great to be in the energy of this place as well. So I am with Walmart.org, and my role today is I help to really think about our philanthropic efforts around sustainability, climate, waste, nature, and people in supply chains. But I didn't start out in corporate by any means. I grew up in the nonprofit sector. But the thread through all of it has been, I really want to solve big problems, but the ones that are important, and they're important for the things that connect all of us on a day-to-day basis.
Great. So what kind of attracted you to then work for an organisation like Walmart, I suppose?
Opportunity for impact.
Yeah.
You know, it's been really an interesting journey because I've worked in a number of different sectors, nonprofit sector, public sector, and I had never really considered the power of the private sector. But clearly market-led solutions are a huge part of the unlock for how we're going to make progress on some of these issues. So the chance to be able to do that with a company like Walmart, who has been on a sustainability journey for such a long time, was a hugely exciting opportunity for me.
And I mean, one of the big things that Walmart is saying currently and saying specifically in certain contexts in and around this event is that we want to become a regenerative company. What does that mean?
It's such a big word, right? We have this conversation of like, how do I explain this to my mom, right? Who really does care about these issues, but would never say, is this regenerative? And what it really means when we talk about it is that in the moment of decision, in the moment of when we're creating strategy, we're putting humanity and nature into those decisions and at the center of them. And so it needs to show up in everything that we do. Now, that's still a really big concept. You know, what does that truly mean in a purchasing decision? In the moment where we're thinking about our operations, we're thinking about economics, right? These are huge concepts. So I boil it down to things like an example of something that we just announced. So we're working on tuna. And when we're making that buying decision, we're saying, can we do this in a way where the investments that are going into purchasing this tuna are also going into restoration, to conservation, and to the livelihoods of the people in this community?
So it's almost looking at your entire product portfolio and saying, how does that become nature positive and net positive, which is a big task, right? And I guess that leads to my next question, which is, we're at COP26. Obviously, Walmart has circular economy ambitions, you have climate ambitions, you have your regenerative ambitions. What's the kind of thread or connection between these things?
Yeah, these are such interconnected systems, right? Everything comes from somewhere. And in those places, the natural resources, the impact of climate, and the impact on people's day-to-day lives are so intertwined, right? Every product is someone's livelihood. Every resource that gets turned into something came from nature. So there's really no way actually to not connect them. And I think we've been missing the conversation for so long by not really thinking in this more robust way. So for us, at the core of all of that is if we put economics, environment, and people, then you really get to different sets of solutions and different sets of ideas.
Our circular design team would always say, there's a notion of kind of zooming in and zooming out, the ability to zoom into specific parts of the system and zoom out and understand the whole perspective. And it was true, every time we kind of look into one of these systems, what we kind of find is that there's a lot of kind of vertical innovation, like in particular parts of the chain, great on recycling systems, for instance, or great in terms of design of things, but there's not a lot of system innovation, which is a challenge even for a company with the reach and impact of Walmart to accomplish on its own.
Absolutely. And because the kinds of solutions I think we're all trying to get to are the ones that require scale. It's sort of a classic problem of I've seen amazing innovations in individual products, but because we can't adapt an entire consumer base to really be excited about them, they don't get the kind of scale that they deserve. And those kinds of things really take us more to that system level approach, the infrastructure that can allow those innovations to really live into their promise.
Some people who are watching this will have been in a Walmart before. Some of them may not have been if they're not in the right geography.
They should go.
And when they walk through the aisles, they may look at the amazing array of products and they probably will be forgiven for thinking, well, this is actually a company that has massively thrived and succeeded in a linear economy, like just the range of products, the pace of innovation. And they may challenge and say, how is that ever going to become regenerative? How can that ever become part of a circular economy? What do you say to them?
Yeah. So Walmart was really built on this idea of democratizing access to products. That was sort of the core tenet of how the company was built. And so it wasn't necessarily built on linear, though that was the model I think that retail broadly has been built on, but with this idea of how do we help people get access to the things that they want. I think that will be true and continue to be true in a circular system as well. And part of what I think is interesting and exciting is that is already shifting and changing. So if folks walk down an aisle in a Walmart today, they might see a whole array of products and not even realize that circularity has built in to the design. So I think of one example. So if you walked into the pet aisle, you would see these really adorable pet beds. They're very cute, but they're made out of hard to recycle mattresses, right? So you don't necessarily know that the product was built in a way of trying to build circularity into the design, but it's there and it's on offer. If you went into apparel, you would see that our private brand apparel is all trying to be built with more recycled content and created with that. You would see that in all kinds of aspects of the business. So there are a lot of products actually that are being built in material design, through that whole spectrum with circularity in mind. We just don't necessarily always talk about it. And I think that's a huge opportunity, is to be able to have that visibility in the conversation. I also think it's really important that we're trying out things that are built on an entirely different system, reuse models, resale models. We've started to work with organizations like ThreadUp, which is really exciting, so that we can try to test out how do we just do this entirely differently and offer a whole array of choices for customers to be able to participate and be able to actually experience these kinds of products and services.
Jim, thanks for joining us. I wondered if actually, first off, you could tell us a little bit about you. Like, what's your background? How did you get to become Chief Sustainability Officer at PepsiCo?
Sure, happy to. And a real pleasure to be here, Seb. I grew up as a kid spending a lot of time outdoors. I always went camping, and my family always did that. So I've always spent a lot of time in the woods, but really, I'm a scuba diver. And I love to scuba dive. And what really has galvanized some of me from a personal standpoint is that, half the world's coral reefs are already gone. and probably another 75% of them are seriously threatened when it comes to global warming. So that's a real personal call to action. On a professional side, I've been with PepsiCo about 5 years. I've been Chief Sustainability Officer for a little over a year. And before that, I ran strategy for the group and also bought our SodaStream business. And that's obviously a real positive sustainability business that we have and very fast growing. That's sort of been my journey. I'm a business guy with a real passion for sustainability.
And we're recording this in Glasgow during COP26. PepsiCo made a really interesting kind of statement in the lead up to this event around ambitions to be regenerative. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's one of those words that to us it means to have a positive impact. And what we want to do as a company is to have a positive impact. That's why we launched our program called PepsiCo Positive, which is it's not a sustainability program. It's an end-to-end business transformation that is changing, how we make our products, how we grow our products, how we transform, really how we grow and create value on an end-to-end basis with sustainability squarely at the center of it. And to us, that's about how do we become positive as a company in really three broad areas: agriculture, positive value chain, all the things, and then positive choices, both our portfolio, and then how do we use our brands to inspire consumers to be aware of and make positive choices.
And what I'm hearing you say there is, it's not about just doing less bad. It's not like how do we make PepsiCo have less negative impacts. It's about how does PepsiCo become a nature positive company, a people positive company.
Yeah, and that's why we call it, exactly right. That's why we call the program PepsiCo Positive, because we want to be a positive force in all the things we do, all the communities that we're in, all the people that we touch.
One of the things that's quite interesting about that as well is that many of our audience, when they think of PepsiCo, will probably imagine a soft drinks beverage. Sure. What does the actual portfolio look like? What does it mean to be regenerative at PepsiCo? Because actually when we talk about regenerative, we talk about agriculture, we don't necessarily think about soft drinks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And honestly, before I started PepsiCo, I probably thought the same thing. We're a food company. We're 55, going on 60% food-based as the biggest part of our portfolio and the fastest growing. And so we've got brands like Quaker, like Frito-Lay, like Tropicana, like Gatorade. In addition to, obviously, the name on the door, Pepsi, but today it's only 11 or 12% of the company. So it's a very broad-based, very big food and beverage company that looks very different than, as you say, most people probably have in their minds. And therefore, agriculture is a critical part of it. Our agricultural footprint's about 7 million acres a year, which is a pretty big number.
And again, if you're, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, impact, that's your impact and your opportunity to create change.
Right. I mean, we're $70+ billion, 200 countries, 290,000 associates. So just sort of right there, we've got the opportunity to have an impact at scale. The opportunity for us is to use that size and that scale to really drive that kind of impact across, all those pillars of our PepsiCo Positive ambition.
That opportunity, of course, is also a challenge. It's very challenging when you're such a large organization. I've obviously thrived pre-circular economy, pre-regenerative ambitions. What are some of the biggest challenges and barriers to accomplishing some of the things that you've talked about?
Well, it obviously depends on the topic, but I would say broadly, it's how do we harness that size and that scale across the full agenda. And so if you take something like packaging, which obviously is something that we're very aware of our responsibility around, recycling is a big piece of what we're trying to do and really trying to use our scale to lean in on increasing recycling rates, which is engaging with consumers, getting infrastructure built, because that is a partnership with other companies, organizations such as yourself, governments, to really get that infrastructure built, and then obviously also having sound policy. And so it's really how do we, all of these issues are systems issues, and so it's how do we use what we can bring in partnership and collaboration, because we can't do this by ourselves. How do we use our skills and capabilities and size to help drive change in that system, because that's the only way we're going to solve these issues. These are big issues globally.
Of course, we'll have to see how PepsiCo and Walmart do against these ambitions, but the word regenerative does feel really important to me, that signal of trying to do more good rather than just less bad. Of course, we don't really know exactly even what innovation is needed in this space. And at that same event in COP26, my colleague Gabriella Hewitt caught up with the Foundation's own Elliot Beebe from the Food Initiative to find out a little bit more about an exhibition that he was hosting, showcasing potential food products of the future that can help to regenerate nature.
Joining me at the Foundation's Circular Economy Cafe today is Elliot from our food team. The food team have recently just launched the Food Redesign Study. Elliot, can you tell me a bit about the study, please?
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. So in the Big Food Redesign, we outline how food manufacturers and retailers can fundamentally redesign their product portfolios to help achieve regenerative and nature-positive outcomes. And here in the Climate Hub, the New York Times Climate Hub today, we put together a small exhibition of the types of future products that we could be designing to achieve these outcomes. And they're not intended in any way to be prescriptive, but they're rather to promote and provoke discussions between our guests here at the cafe.
Great, that sounds so exciting. There's been so much interest in them throughout the last couple of days, and I'm sure into next week too. Can you tell me a little bit more about the products we've got on show here today?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got 3 products here today. I must stress they're not real, but we hope something like them will be designed and created in future. So the first product we've got here today is Climate Crunch. So that's a breakfast cereal that's been redesigned to use all the products from a regenerative farm. And on those farms, they're using a bunch of different practices such as intercropping. So the wheat and the peas are grown together in the field at the same time because of the symbiotic benefits of doing so to help build healthy soil. In addition to that, they use minimal tills, so the soil is disturbed as little as possible, and that helps to promote healthy soils as well. Next up, we've got Silvo. So Silvo is a line of cheese products that's produced in a silvopasture system. So the farmers that produce the milk and the walnuts for Silvo grow them in the same system. So the livestock, the cattle, are grazing amongst the walnut trees, and they're managed in a system called managed intensive grazing, where they're constantly moving, they're fertilizing the soil, and they're building healthy soil to help it sequester carbon. Now, in an ideal context, this system can actually sequester more carbon than the livestock are producing. So this really helps to highlight the potentially really positive role that livestock could have in future.
Great, that's so interesting. Thank you so much for taking us through those. Would you like to tell me about the last one?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So the final product is Sweet Up. So this is a range of cookies. They're made entirely of upcycled ingredients. So just for the audience, upcycled ingredients are when you take an inedible byproduct of a food product and then you transform it into an edible ingredient. So a really good example of that, one of the ingredients that used in Sweet Up is coffee cherry. So when we grow coffee, we only really use the beans of that coffee, that's the seed of the coffee fruit. And we obviously roast that, we grind that up and we make coffee from it. But what's left behind is a fleshy fruit, and that's usually wasted or just left to rot in the fields. And that's a real untapped resource that we could use to produce new ingredients. So Sweet Up it uses a flour, so instead of using wheat flour, they use this coffee cherry flour, and that has so many benefits for it really helps us to make the most of land that's already in use for agriculture and produce more food overall.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Circular Economy Show. In case you haven't noticed yet, in 2022, we're now publishing a weekly podcast alongside our regular Circular Economy shows, which will include longer versions of some of the conversations featured in this episode. So do search Circular Economy Show podcast on any of your favourite podcast channels, Spotify, Apple, and so on. As always, we really appreciate any feedback or questions that this episode's left with, so leave those in the comments section below. But thanks for watching this episode, and we'll see you again on the next one.